Well, I think gaming has changed in the last 15 to 20 years, mainly by, if we look at the consumer and how the profile of the consumer has changed, that's really probably the best proxy for how gaming itself has changed. So you have a whole class of consumers that, there are many, many people that played Pong in the late 70s, early 80s. And then they sort of became lapsed consumers. They were like, well, I'm kind of done with that. And in fact, video game industry went through a major cratering in the early 80s when, after Atari sort of came and went, so to speak, as the big thing, video games kind of passed from the popular consciousness, from the minds of most people in the United States and Europe. Now, when there was a resurgence in the late 80s, starting with Nintendo, first in Japan and then in the United States with the Nintendo Entertainment System, it became the obsession of sort of teenage or probably grade school teenage boys. And it stayed there in the early to mid 90s. And that's really the point of entry for us into video games. Since then, we see sort of a broadening. These guys have grown up. We grew up to a certain extent. We're still engaged in video games, but the type of games that we're playing now interest us today. There weren't the pastimes of 13-year-olds, even though sometimes I think my inner child never escaped me. But they're the passions of 18 to 24-year-old, 24 to 35-year-old, and as the demographic ages, we start making new types of experiences that really sort of engage these kind of growing audiences. So we see kind of a trend where the gaming industry really went from this kind of 8 to 13-year-old boys in the early 90s to getting into the 18 to 24-year-old up to 35-year-old, largely male. After 2000, that started encompassing more and more women in gaming, especially with online games, social games especially, types of experiences that were less competitive and cutthroat and achievement-oriented and more social oriented type of games, more self-expression type of games that tended to have more of a cross-gender appeal or a broader appeal. Certainly games, some of the great games by Nintendo, among others, have brought in sort of wide audiences into gaming. And today we see that demographic again shifting. Nintendo made a bet when they came out with a Wii that was very different than Sony or Microsoft. Instead of upping the ante on the graphics side, they said, we're going to change the way gamers interact, the point of interface. And so it became the hardware and the software combination, the way you interface into these worlds that made a big difference into saying, well, games aren't just for the core gamer, not just for the 13-year-old boys that grow up, but it's for everybody. It's for the person that picks up the steering wheel and starts, turning it to have a great racing experience or something like that, or a person that swings the Wiimote that can play tennis. And today we see older generation, people in retirement homes playing video games. We see a huge population playing them on the net. We see kids, their parents, their grandparents, all playing together around their TV in games like Guitar Hero. So the medium itself, while positively aging with the core consumers, has really become much more expansive. It's started to become a place where we can really broadly engage the popular consciousness, really. And I think that's just really the start. We've really just scratched the surface as far as that goes.
What's it like working with your brother?
That's a good question. It's been a challenge at times working with my brother, but I couldn't ask for a better partner than him. Really, it's pretty funny, when we're only a year apart, my brother and I. So we used to fight a lot. We used to compete over the same things. We used to compete for favorite status with our parents, for better grades, for better this. We used to have the same teachers year after year, that kind of thing. And over time, it's really just been amazing to, go from that kind of sibling rivalry almost. And it's really weird because even though we had all that, I think he said, hey, I think I want to make a video game in '91. And about 15 minutes later, I said, well, can I do that too? And we've been working together ever since. And now it's just, we seem like two peas in a pod. I mean, he thinks in a different way. For me, people that observe us really look at us as, very complementary. What I'm good at, he's good at, and what he's good at, I'm not that good at. And so, it's, I really have come to admire him as one of the, I've learned a lot from him, and one of the great people in our industry.